This week in Beyond the Headlines, BVI's fiscal status on the road to recovery.
I believe that today, by the signature of this document, the Minister and Her Majesty's Government, which he represents, has demonstrated a renewed confidence in this territory.
I have great confidence in your Premier and his team. He inherited a tough situation, and there's no question that there were some significant challenges that he had to address. And I do believe that the action he's taken has given confidence to the UK government, to the wider markets. And I think in this very tough global climate, any government that takes action to address deficits and potential problems in its finances is going to command respect.
The BVI is well on the road to financial recovery, a move that received welcome support and words of confirmation recently as Minister for the Overseas Territories Henry Bellingham expressed his confidence in the renewed financial position of the BVI. The remarks were made on Monday, April 23rd as the Premier, along with Governor Boyd McCleary, signed a new agreement with the UK government, who was represented by Minister Bellingham. Named the Protocols for Effective Financial Management, the agreement signalled an improved information sharing relationship between the BVI and the UK governments as it relates to the territory's finances. Minister Bellingham called the BVI a huge success story, adding that the UK wants to partner with the territory to help build upon what it has already been able to achieve.
So I think there's no question, Premier, but BVI is a huge success story. There's no doubt about that. For a small country to have achieved so much really is nothing short of remarkable. But that success is something that we're very proud of. But we want to work with you in partnership to guarantee and to protect that success going forward. Now, very importantly, and I'm glad you mentioned it, Honourable Premier, we discussed public finances. And I'm very pleased indeed, we're going to shortly sign the Government of British Virgin Islands protocols for effective financial management. These demonstrate, as you rightly pointed out, the BVI government's commitment to prudent fiscal management and returning the finances, the public finances, to a sustainable footing. And I think this is going to be welcomed throughout the BVI and indeed internationally.
Furthermore, Minister Bellingham expressed confidence in Premier Smith and his government. He said that any government which seeks to address its deficit commands respect, and Premier Smith is doing just that.
I have great confidence in your Premier and his team. He inherited a tough situation, and there's no question that there were some significant challenges that he had to address. And I do believe that the action he's taken has given confidence to the UK government, to the wider markets. And I think in this very tough global climate, any government that takes action to address deficits and potential problems in its finances is going to command respect. And so the measures that the Premier is taking, I think, are doing exactly that. And of course there are going to be challenges ahead. But as I said, the whole essence of our relationship is one based on trust and partnership. And that's why having this protocol in place is it's a big comfort factor to the UK, because it means that there's a commitment in place to manage public finances efficiently and effectively.
But prior to Monday's protocol's signing, the state of the territory's finances had been a cause for concern in recent times. Apart from the economic shake-up in 2008 that has left many countries struggling to regain their footing financially, news of bad spending practices and last-minute contract signings came to the forefront as the Premier addressed the state of the PVI's finances when taking office in November last year. The Premier on Wednesday, December 7, 2011, presented an update on the territory's financial status, which he said included a running deficit of some $51 million, as well as close to $20 million in unpaid bills for capital projects. The Premier further noted during his address that both capital and recurrent expenditure were expected to increase by 50% and 3% respectively, and he said this resulted in an actual breach in the borrowing guidelines agreement. Speaking with JTV News on Wednesday, April 25th, Financial Secretary Neil Smith explained that this issue of the territory's liquidity, or its ability to turn its assets into available cash, was of concern to the UK government, as it was below what it should have been when the NDP government took office. Smith said that one of the requirements within the borrowing guidelines for overseas territories was a healthy cash balance, and this was low in the BVI's case.
The reason why we ran into trouble with the UK government is that the liquidity, government's liquidity, is not that good. So they measured, we had the previous borrowing guidelines, I think you've heard us speak about those. And there were three things that they were looking at in that. And one of those things is the cash balances. Those cash balances went below the threshold. And because of that, we had to get approvals for any other loans, any other commitments that were placed on government, external commitments, I should say. And that really is a problem. The problem is not really the loan, the outstanding loans per se, because they're okay, right? But there's the liquidity was really, I don't want to say deplorable, but not in a good position.
With eyes on its overseas territories since the global economic downturn, the UK sought to ensure that no additional liabilities befell its own already struggling economy. As such, the UK government sought a more effective means of measuring how prudent the OTs were being with their finances. According to Neil Smith, it was then that the UK government developed the Framework for Fiscal Responsibility, or the FFR, an agreement which it sought to sign with the OTs in an attempt to ensure that, among other things, these territories with ties to the UK practice good financial management and remain in a position where they are able to run their own finances. One of the arrangements within the FFR was that the overseas territories would send their budgets to the UK for pre-approval before having them passed in the local House of Assembly, an arrangement that some OTs found troubling, including the BVI. The Premier was determined to keep the BVI in control of its own financial affairs as it had since 1976, after it ceased the need for granting aid, and therefore he did not sign the FFR document. The Financial Secretary said that instead government modified it to better fit the circumstances within the BVI, while still adhering to concerns of fiscal responsibility and transparency being called for in the FFR.
They developed another framework that was a bit more comprehensive, and that is the controversial document that arose during election, and that we were able to modify substantially to our benefit. When I say all, the Virgin Islands' benefit, while still maintaining those principles of medium-term planning and transparency, accountability, risk management. We are able to partner really and have, fairly good discussions with the United Kingdom to modify that initial document, or change the initial document to one that is sensitive to the peculiarities of the Virgin Islands.
Premier Smith and his government continued to undergo a series of discussions with the UK government in an attempt to prove that the BVI was in a position to properly manage its finances and turn the situation which they met in November around. The question everyone was asking, however, was whether or not this government was in fact able to remain in control of its budget, or would it still have to go to the UK government for pre-approval? That question was finally answered on Monday, April 23rd, during the signing of the Protocols for Effective Financial Management, when in response to the question of the UK government pre-approving the BVI's budget, Minister Bellingham said it is not their intention to micromanage the budgets of the overseas territories. Instead, what the government of the UK expected is transparency as it relates to sharing of information.
No, we don't want to micromanage the budgets of territories, but we do expect to share information, and we expect to know what's going on, and that's very important.
Just a follow-up, does this mean that it's different from the situation in Cayman Islands where they have to submit it for pre-approval?
Look, unlike some countries, namely the French, we don't have sort of one-size-fits-all for our territories, and we don't try and micromanagement. We actually believe in working in partnership. We believe in building up trust. I think the trust we're building up between our two governments is manifest. It's represented by that document there, and we have every confidence that information will be shared in the future. I don't know what you feel, Premier, but that is what it's all about.
No, I do concur with what Minister Bellingham said. The whole idea is the development of this new framework for financial management is partly to make sure that this country is managing its affairs much better than it has been in the past. And in so doing, to reassure the British government that they will not be saddled with unnecessary liabilities. And in so doing, of course, exchange information and discourse is necessary, as it has always been. There's always been discourse between the Financial Secretary and other financial persons in the Treasury and the Her Majesty's government. The last budget that was passed in the House of Assembly was then assented to as was required by the governor, and this process will continue.
Premier Smith also confirmed that the UK would not be pre-approving the VI's budget. He said one would not find a request to send the budget to the UK for pre-approval in the signed protocols. During his recent interview with JTV News, the Financial Secretary also stated that with the previous financial standing of the BVI, the territory's budget would have had to be pre-approved by the UK. However, Smith said that they were able to convince the UK that this would not be necessary, and the newly signed protocols would ensure that government continues on the road to financial recovery.
Because of the situation before, it was true that the Virgin Islands would have been required to get permission for the budgets before they were presented in the House, but we were able to show the United Kingdom that wouldn't be necessary based on the other procedures that we would partaking. Right? So it's, I think anyone seeing the original document and seeing this document would realize that it's a vast difference between them. And in this new document, there's a lot of responsibility on the Virgin Islands, right? Which is not a bad thing. We have a locally elected government, and they should be able to ensure that the procedures are in place to, guarantee that good financial practice is the order of the day, as opposed to the exception.
According to the Premier, the protocols for effective financial management will be complemented by a strengthened public finance management law that will be drafted and presented in the House of Assembly later this year, as government continues to show itself financially responsible to the UK government and the rest of the world, while at the same time maintaining autonomy of its own financial affairs.
In these protocols, one will find the very strong principles of medium-term planning, transparency, decision-making based on accurate quantitative data and analysis, value for money guarantees, and proactive risk management at its core principles. In these proposals, one will not find a requirement to send a budget to the United Kingdom for approval, nor will one find the heavy, intrusive hand of a concerned big brother, but instead will find a commitment by the Virgin Islands to manage itself responsibly, and the United Kingdom government who now recognizes that the people of this territory can and will, if given the opportunity, take care of themselves responsibly. I believe that today, by the signature of this document, the Minister and Her Majesty's government, which he represents, has demonstrated a renewed confidence in this territory. A new direction is being forged, ladies and gentlemen, a dramatic change, one that signals a departure from the old ways of partnership to the partnership that is based on mutual respect and the shared value of doing what is best in the best interest of our people. My colleagues and I have but one goal in advancing this partnership between the United Kingdom and the Virgin Islands. This goal proposes that each side will always consider the position of the other, and that we will move ahead on one accord, recognizing that though we may have different circumstances, as a unit, we can build off of each other's strengths to form a mutually beneficial solution and destiny.
This is Walter Barrett, Beyond the Headlines.